If you want to speak in a way people actually remember, you cannot just repeat information. You have to understand the thing deeply enough that it has changed you first. That is where most people go wrong. They collect quotes, memorize ideas, copy opinions, and try to sound intelligent, but the audience can feel when the words are borrowed. They can sense when someone is speaking from the surface instead of from real understanding. Because powerful communication does not begin with performance, it begins with depth. If you want to talk about anxiety, you need to understand what fear does to a person at 2 a.m., when the room is quiet and their mind will not stop racing. If you want to talk about responsibility, you need to understand the weight of carrying something important when no one else can carry it for you. If you want to talk about failure, you need to understand what it feels like to stand in the ruins of something you once believed would work. That kind of understanding gives your words weight, not because you sound polished, but because you sound real. People do not listen deeply to someone who is only trying to impress them. They listen when they feel that you have wrestled with the idea long enough to earn the right to speak about it. And that is the first rule of powerful communication. Do not speak just to appear intelligent. Speak because there is something real you are trying to understand. Before you speak, you need to know what problem you are actually trying to solve, not just the topic, the problem. There is a huge difference between saying, "I want to talk about confidence," and asking, "Why do so many people appear confident on the outside but secretly feel empty and afraid underneath?" The first is a topic. The second is a problem. And people pay attention to problems because problems create tension. They create urgency. They make the audience feel that something important is at stake. A strong talk, a strong story, or a strong video should revolve around a central human struggle: loneliness, fear of failure, identity confusion, the search for meaning, the pain of responsibility, the feeling that modern life is busy but strangely empty. These are not abstract subjects. These are things people actually live through. When you speak around a real problem, the audience does not feel like they are receiving random information. They feel like they are being guided through something they already carry inside themselves. That is why weak communication often feels forgettable. It has no wound at the center. It has no question that matters. But when a speaker is genuinely trying to understand something painful, confusing, or meaningful, people lean in. Because they are not just listening to information anymore. They are watching a mind struggle honestly with reality, and that struggle is what makes communication feel alive. Facts can inform people, but stories make them feel the truth. That is why a single personal story can stay in someone's mind longer than a page of statistics. You can tell someone that resilience matters, and they may nod politely. But if you tell them about a person who lost a business, spent months rebuilding their life, felt humiliated, doubted everything, and still slowly stood back up, suddenly the idea becomes human. The audience can see it, they can feel it, and once they feel it, they remember it. This is how the mind works. People do not naturally organize life through facts alone. They understand reality through narrative, emotion, conflict, and transformation. A fact without meaning often feels dead, but a fact placed inside a story becomes alive. If you are explaining fear, show what fear does to someone before they make an important phone call. If you are explaining discipline, show the person who keeps a promise to themselves on a day when no one is watching. If you are explaining responsibility, show the parent who is exhausted but still shows up because someone depends on them. That is why great speakers do not simply list ideas. They build a journey. They take the audience from confusion to clarity, from tension to insight, from discomfort to meaning. Because people rarely change just because they heard something true. They change when a story makes the truth impossible to ignore. People can sense fake certainty. They may not always know how to explain it, but they can feel it. A person who only knows an idea intellectually speaks differently from someone who has lived through it. Their words may be correct, but something is missing. There is no emotional precision, no weight, no scar tissue underneath the sentence. That is why experience matters. A person speaking about burnout after actually pushing themselves too far sounds different from someone simply repeating productivity advice. A person speaking about grief after losing someone speaks differently from someone describing grief from a textbook. A person speaking about fear after rebuilding their life after failure carries a tone that cannot be faked. This does not mean every speaker must suffer dramatically before they can speak. but it does mean ideas must connect to reality. If your words have never been tested against life, they often remain thin. Real communication happens when knowledge passes through experience and comes out changed. That is what creates authenticity. Not perfect delivery, not fancy vocabulary, not a flawless stage presence, but the feeling that the speaker is telling the truth as honestly as they can. And the audience responds to that, because deep down, people are tired of performance. They are tired of language that sounds impressive but feels empty. They want something real. They want to hear from someone who has actually wrestled with the thing they are talking about. Great communication is not just speaking, it is connection. Many people make the mistake of treating an audience like a wall. They deliver information at them instead of speaking with them. And when that happens, the room goes emotionally cold. The words may be smart, the structure may be clean, the speaker may be prepared, but something human is missing. A powerful speaker makes the audience feel included in the act of thinking. They do not sound like they are reciting a script from a distance. They sound like they are exploring something with you in real time. That creates intimacy, even in a room full of people. You can feel it when a speaker looks at the audience as individuals instead of as a crowd. You can feel it when they pause because they are actually considering what they just said. You can feel it when they are not hiding behind performance. And sometimes the strongest sign of attention is silence. Not bored silence, focused silence. The kind that happens when people are fully locked in because they do not want to miss the next thought. That is what real communication does. It does not overwhelm people with noise. It pulls them into a shared space where speaker and listener are both following the same question. And in that moment, the talk stops being a performance. It becomes a conversation. A completely safe talk often feels dead. It may be polished. It may be organized. It may have no mistakes. But if there is no risk, there is often no electricity. The audience becomes gripped when they feel that something real is happening right now. That is why live improvisation can feel more powerful than a perfectly programmed performance. A musician improvising on stage creates tension because everyone knows the moment is alive. It could fail. It could surprise even the artist. It could go somewhere no one expected. Speaking works the same way. A speaker who is willing to think honestly in front of people creates a different kind of attention. There is uncertainty. There is movement. There is discovery. Of course, this does not mean you should be unprepared. Preparation matters, but over-preparation can become a cage. If every sentence is locked down, the talk may become safe, but it can also lose its soul. Powerful communication requires a balance. You need enough knowledge to stand on, but enough openness to explore, because the audience can tell when you are simply reciting something memorized. And they can also tell when you are genuinely trying to follow an idea to its deepest point. That willingness to risk uncertainty is part of what makes communication unforgettable. We live in a world drowning in information. People can access facts instantly. They can watch tutorials, read summaries, listen to podcasts, and collect endless advice. But more information has not necessarily made people wiser. Because information alone does not transform anyone. Meaning does. A fact becomes meaningful when it changes how someone sees the world, how they understand themselves, or how they act tomorrow. Learning about fear only matters if it helps someone face what they have been avoiding. Learning about habits only matters if it changes the way someone organizes their day. Learning about loneliness only matters if it helps someone understand why they keep protecting themselves from connection. Otherwise, information becomes noise. This is why great communication always answers a hidden question. Why does this matter to my life? If the audience cannot feel that connection, they drift away. But when an idea touches something real in their experience, they stay. Because now the idea is not floating in abstraction. It has consequences. It affects behavior. It shifts perception. It changes priorities. And that is the purpose of speaking well. Not to fill the air, but to make reality clearer. The most powerful communicators are usually not people who simply learned speaking techniques. They are people who spent years wrestling with one deep question. How do people create meaning? Why do people betray themselves? How can someone live honestly in a world full of pressure? Why does suffering destroy some people but transform others? What makes a person strong enough to tell the truth? Questions like these are not solved quickly. They follow a person for years. And that is where depth comes from. Not from trying to sound smart, but from returning again and again to a problem that matters so much. You cannot leave it alone. Over time, everything you read, experience, observe, and suffer begins connecting to that central concern. Your knowledge becomes organized around it. Your stories begin circling it. Your voice becomes clearer because your purpose becomes clearer. That is why great speaking does not begin with the question, how do I impress people? It begins with a deeper question. What problem am I truly trying to understand? Because if the problem is real enough, your words will carry weight. And if you spend enough time wrestling with it honestly, your communication will stop sounding like performance. It will begin sounding like truth. And truth, spoken clearly from lived understanding, is what people remember.